This is Iowa Everywhere. And now, it's time for Two Guys Named Chris, powered by Fareway Meat and Grocery. This is Iowa Everywhere. For the fans.
All right, baby, let's get after it on a Monday. I feel like this is the first time that both fan bases have been happy all year.
I don't think there's any question about that, is there? I mean, even though I think Iowa and Iowa State probably won early on in the season the same day, I mean, the Iowa game was South Dakota State, which was just horrible.
Yeah.
So, I think so.
In Nevada,
it's Iowa State's first conference win. It's been a while, man.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Hoop starts tonight, this afternoon, if you're a women's basketball fan in the state. A lot to get to here on Two Guys Named Chris. Shout out to Fareway. I got my Fareway Truckers hat in the mail. I saw you got one too. You put it up on Twitter.
Yeah.
You're going to be walking around. You need to walk into the Piggly Wiggly down there in Florida and say, this is what a frickin' meat department looks like, you idiots.
I wore mine all the way to Birmingham. I wore mine on the plane.
Man, you had a hell of a game this week.
Jesus. Double overtime. I was exhausted at the end of that game.
Yeah, I caught up on it last night, and our Roadrunners, my Roadrunners, you can't say that, they pulled one out. I love that team. I love watching that team play.
That's what they do, man. They've got one of the longest winning streaks in the country now. They've won 6 straight. I just saw it's like the tied for the 5th longest in the country. But I think they're going to go unbeaten in conference play, and they'll end up ranked at the end of the year. I don't think they'll be in contention for a New Year's 6 game because of a couple early losses, but
yeah,
they just win, baby.
Looking forward to next weekend already. Because my Green Wave from Tulane, they got a big one. UCF.
How about College Game Day not going there and going to what, Texas instead?
Yeah, it's Texas TCU. I mean, I think you can make
TCU's
an
unbeaten. Great.
Yeah.
I mean, but come on, that would have been a great scene, great story. New Orleans, awesome place.
I agree with you. I just got my Tulane sweatshirt in the mail. Be wearing it all week, baby. Go Green Wave.
The Tulane logos and gear, incredible.
I bought a flag with that logo for our studio in Ankeny. We're just going to fly the Green Wave flag. Neutral. Iowa and Iowa State fans.
You keep talking about this studio, yet every time I see you, you're in your house.
Well, I'll probably be doing this show from here because I have to take my kids to school, and then it's just I don't have time to get to Ankeny. But anyway,
I got a solid 11 hours of sleep last night.
Screw you. Iowa. We'll start with Iowa because it was the more surprising outcome of the weekend.
How about that?
I don't think anybody's shocked that Iowa won. I mean, they were only a 3-point underdog when that thing kicked off. To win 24-3 is the very shocking aspect of that football game.
The second quarter was shocking.
Yeah.
I mean, when Iowa was just ripping off explosive play after explosive play, that was shocking. And that's all they needed. They needed that little run where they were just hitting 40 and 50 yarders. The offense looked great in that quarter. And I think the most impressive thing is they held Purdue out of the end zone.
Yeah.
I went back and looked at their totals throughout the last couple of seasons. And Purdue had scored 20-plus in, I can't remember the exact number. I want to say 14, 15 straight games. And Iowa held them to 3 points.
Really incredible. I think, too, we didn't learn a lesson. That's not the right way to put it, but it just shows you when you have a semblance of a running game how much more competent quarterbacks look. We saw that in Ames and with the Hawkeyes this week.
Right. And, God, with Iowa, it's the offensive line. I mean, the improvement that they've made, how bad they were, and now being able to open up some holes in the running game to start drives opens everything up. And we have not seen that since the early part of last season. And I think this is the biggest win that Iowa's had, most important win, since they beat Penn State last season before they went on that dive. Because it's a Purdue team that's owned you. It's a coach that's owned Kirk Ferentz. It's the Charlie Jones story.
Yeah.
Sure, he got his yardage-wise, but they held them out of the end zone.
Yeah.
That story, as far as I'm concerned, is pretty much dead now. Sure, Iowa would be better off had they kept Charlie Jones, had they had Charlie Jones this season, but I think we were all thinking, boy, he's going to torch Iowa. This was a game that many of us, me and I think you included, before the season, had that as a loss.
Oh, absolutely. This was one of the sure things for me.
And so this is like a 2-game swing for the Hawkeyes. This could totally turn the season around.
That's kind of where I automatically wanted to go here. I mean, by the time we get on the air, it's Monday morning. It's kind of already time to look ahead. A massive game for Iowa, Wisconsin coming to town. It's crazy what 2-3 weeks does in college football. Wisconsin's firing their coach. Iowa with the not one of the worst offense in college football that is the butt of jokes nationally. You don't even have to be on a college football medium. People are making fun of Iowa during NFL games. And now it's like, this is a big game. Like, there's actual Big Ten West implications because of that Illinois loss. It opened up a ton of, Iowa still is going to need a lot of help to play for a Big Ten championship, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, Hassel. This is a huge game on Saturday.
And as we found out last season, Iowa is technically crowned Big Ten West champions, even if they tie with the winner and lose the tiebreaker. It's not like you have to win the tiebreaker to be able to say we're Big Ten West champions. They were given the trophy after they beat Nebraska last season before that game that got them into.
Didn't they put that on Twitter and we're all like, wait a minute?
Yeah. Yeah, because it seems like 3-4 teams could tie and be a division champion. Anyway, Illinois has to lose twice. They've got Purdue, Michigan, and Northwestern. Let's chalk Michigan up as a loss. That's at Michigan. So
yeah.
they have to lose either this week home against that Purdue team that Iowa just destroyed, or at Northwestern. Still far-fetched.
Yeah.
And Iowa would obviously still have to win out. But they do have the head-to-head now against Purdue, who they're tied with. They would have the head-to-head against Wisconsin and Minnesota, who they're tied with right now as well. Now, it's a big if, but it's still a possibility. And, Chris, I didn't think this was a possibility even a week ago. I mean, I just didn't see this season turning around the way it has. And I don't think many people did. But
what do you think is the difference? Do you think
offensive line?
That's it. It's just simple. You don't
Yes.
think Brian Ferentz has all of a sudden gotten nice and creative, like just
No.
the offensive line?
No, I do think that Brian Ferentz is calling a better game.
Yeah.
I think when they implemented the pre-snap motion and the potential jet sweeps, I think that totally changed things and gave defensive coordinators and defensive players more to think about. But I think the offensive line just opening up holes and the ability to run the football. Now teams aren't, they're more worried about the run, and that opens things up for the passing game and Spencer Petras. And Petras, we know that he can look competent if he's not pressured. If he's not under siege, which he has been the majority of his career, he can deliver some nice footballs. He can lead some good drives. And that offensive line is, for the most part, protecting him. But I think the bigger aspect here is that they're starting to run the football. I mean, when you run the football, that opens everything up. And now Petras can stand back there confidently and deliver the ball.
Iowa opened as a very slight underdog to Wisconsin. That game has now moved into pick'em category, where you sent this note on our pre-show prep that I thought was interesting. Iowa didn't change anything. Wisconsin made a huge change. It'll be interesting to see what gives. And I admittedly haven't watched a ton of Wisconsin the last few weeks. I look forward to studying them the next couple of days. But yeah, this is because you've got the two old guards in the Big Ten West, and it's still Kirk Ferentz chugging along, doing his thing. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin fires their guy, and there's some pep in their step. So, I thought 2 weeks ago this game was going to be a total dud. Big Ten Network written all over it. Boring. The numbers still, open at 33.5, so we're not looking forward to a total like shootout here
What?
by any means.
33 and a half?
That's pretty. I'm pretty sure. Van Winkle, could you look that up for me? The total on the Iowa, I think it's 33 and a half. It's pretty small.
Okay, if you can get it at 33 and a half, I think you take the over.
Yeah, I mean, you have. Like, it's getting to the point. I was talking to Mike Palm about this from Circa. With the Iowa narrative of how bad the offense was is the reason. Like, they're trying to get the random dude in Delaware who watches CBS Sports HQ and just hears about how bad the Iowa offense is to be like, oh, I'm going to pound that under so he can brag to his friends about it. You forget Iowa's defense is good for a touchdown every week or two. But what do you think? How confident are you going into this one?
I mean, I wouldn't say I'm super confident because I think there's a
looks
big
like
variable.
It's 36 right there. Thanks,
36.
Matt.
Okay, that's still extremely low.
Yep.
Wisconsin is a big variable here. I don't know. I think there's more that we don't know about Wisconsin than Iowa at this point because they fire their head coach, then they go out and they just rip Northwestern. Fine. Lose to Michigan State. Disappointing. But then they beat Purdue pretty convincingly, a lot like Iowa did this past week. And they just went out and they beat a Maryland team that's pretty good. I mean, Maryland was 3-2 in conference. They're already bowl eligible. It's just fascinating though because you got an Iowa team that just stood pat. No changes at all. No changes at OC. No changes with the starting quarterback.
Not only
They've
stood
turned
pat,
it around.
they dug in.
Yeah, right. That's
right?
a good way to put it.
Like
Iowa dug in, and Wisconsin just totally wiped the slate clean, started over mid-season, made the change. They're 3-1 since then. Iowa's won 2 in a row and looked good in both of those games. So it's going to be interesting to see what gives this week. Is it the team that fired their head coach, changed everything, or the team that didn't change a damn thing? And it's two programs that really have mirrored each other for the last 30 years as well. So I think it's a kind of a fascinating matchup this week as we see what gives between these two.
I saw you got into a little heat on Twitter with the Iowa fan base on Saturday night.
What's new?
So Spencer Petras, after the game, kind of, I want to say defensive. Let's just hear it. I think Matt has the video and audio of Spencer Petras, and we'll get into this. Let's see what the quarterback had to say.
We talk all the time about not listening to the noise. That what matters is our preparation and continuing to work and to push things through. And I think it's just proof of it, right? No offense to anyone in here, but you guys had us dead two weeks ago. We couldn't do anything right. As did the whole outside world. It felt like, but that's not what football is. Football is a week-to-week game. You keep working, and if you do things right and work hard, then good results happen. And the last 2 weeks, I think, have been proof of that. But obviously, still 3 games left. Our mission is to continue to improve, continue to keep it rolling, and keep the momentum going.
First of all, I want to really, everybody here is really happy for that individual. He's handled everything with class, and I mean, in a really hard situation, he's come out on the other end, which that is admirable. Mm-hmm. So congrats to Spencer Petras on that. You said you didn't really like some of those quotes on Twitter and caught a lot of hell.
I said I wasn't a fan of him saying that.
Yeah, there you go.
And I'm still not a fan of him saying that. Now, I do. He wasn't saying it vindictively or anything. It wasn't really a clapback as it might look in print. Things look different in print than they sound like when you actually watch the quote. And I was reacting to Chad Leistico tweeted out the quote, part of the quote anyway.
It did kind of the way Chad presented it.
It seemed a little edgier.
It seemed like a gotcha type thing. Like, it's kind of how I kind of came across to it as well. And it came across very different watching that video.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a smile on his face, but at the same time, he thinks it. And that's my thing. I know that he thinks it, and I think that's great. I want them to use that as motivation, and I want them to think it. I'm surprised, and I'm just not a huge fan of, I guess, saying that out loud when you've won 2 games back to back, okay, against Northwestern and Purdue. This game, really good win. You were underdogs. Northwestern game, whatever. And Northwestern is bad. I wouldn't mind him saying that at all at the end of the regular season. If you rip off 5 straight wins, you get to 8 wins, and you're all of a sudden looking good, and you prove that, boy, it was just a matter of time, and you turn things around. My thing is like there's still 3 games to go here. You were the worst offense in the country the first half of the season. That wasn't the media.
Correct.
That wasn't the media just saying that you were and putting you down and saying you couldn't do anything right. You literally couldn't do anything right. I mean, that's a fact. And those losses still count. This isn't the NFL where you can lose 4 games early and turn things around and get back to a point of even with everybody else and have a chance to contend for a championship. I mean, those 4 losses, I'm not even going to count the Ohio State one. The 3 losses, the other 3, those hurt big time, and you can't make up for those. Going into the season, if you're an Iowa fan, I think you've got 4 games circled. Iowa State, Michigan, Ohio State, Wisconsin. The Wisconsin game isn't what we thought it would be. We were thinking this Wisconsin game probably for the Big Ten West Championship. That's not the case. Iowa needs a lot of help still. You lost to Iowa State. You lost to Michigan. You got embarrassed by Ohio State, which a lot of teams do. I get it. The damage has been done. There's still a chance to turn this season around and make it a feel-good story by the end of things. And maybe you do get to 8 wins. And maybe things are fine when all is said and done. There's still 3 games to go here. If you don't keep this going, you know that those fans that were out there booing Spencer Petras, which
repeatedly.
I don't condone the booing of
Spencer
Petras in particular, but you know that they're going to see that quote and they're going to put that in the bank. And if they start failing again, that is going to work against him a little bit later on. So I wasn't reading that quote and go, God damn it, that son of a bitch, Spencer Petras, who the hell does he think he is? No, I'm just not a fan of it because I'm, not used to Iowa players really saying things like that, and maybe that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Kirk Ferentz has had such a tight lid on these guys for 2 decades. He's kind of opened it up a little bit.
They couldn't even be on Twitter like 3 years ago, right?
Right. And so I just, it kind of surprised me a little bit, but I want him to have that attitude in practice. I want him to have that attitude in games, like, fuck the world, right?
Maybe he has had that in practice, and that's what we've been hearing about.
Yeah. So, I hope that this thing is totally turned around, and he ends up being quasi-right in that football is a week-to-week thing. You do grow as the season goes on, but for me, the damage is kind of already done. It's nice to see them playing well. It's nice to see them potentially turning this season around. But this wasn't a fabrication, okay? This was the worst offense in the country, and I think in any other program there would have been major changes made. And he's lucky he's playing for Iowa. And they gave him a chance to turn things around, and I think the main reason he's been able to do that is because that offensive line has started to look like an Iowa offensive line. And I think, obviously, when you look back on Petras' struggles, the offensive line has a lot more blame than maybe we thought back at the time. There have been people beating that drum this whole time saying, this really isn't on Petras that much. This is the offensive line. It's both, but I think we're seeing now it was more offensive line than anything.
The one thing, I'll just say it, I would think some Iowa fans thought this, is if they get to like 7-5 or even 8-4 or whatever, I mean, it all but eliminates any sort of dramatic offensive change in the offseason, though. You're right back here.
I think so too. I think even if they just get to 7,
yeah,
maybe depending on how that bowl game looks,
then they can like dig in and be like, well, look, we turned it around.
We told you, we turned this around. We were that offense. What you saw at the end of the season, that's what we saw in practice every week, and that's what we're going to see moving forward next season. And And that's why Spencer Petras is coming back for his COVID year, and he's going to be the starter next season as well. I don't know if that's actually going to happen, but I think you're right.
It's Padilla's time, damn it. Poor
I don't
guy.
know.
He'll never play for Iowa again.
I was thinking, watching that game, that I don't think the offense is any better with Padilla. I mean, you give him more time. Maybe he sidesteps a few of those sacks.
I won't lie. And I haven't seen enough of him. I thought it was. I just watching. I feel like I've always
when the offensive line was terrible. I think it was too.
Exactly. But when they're playing well, he
could play a little backyard football. Let's go, Brian. Let's play a little backyard football with Padilla.
Watching Bryce Young and that play that he made on Saturday night. I mean, all I could think about was that backyard football quote. But I don't know. Well. Regardless, good win for Iowa.
Good win for Iowa.
Great win for Iowa.
You might have turned the season around. I'm not saying the season has turned around, and you've already done your damage. You're probably not even going to compete for a division championship because Illinois has to lose twice. But there's a chance to turn this into a pretty decent season, but you got to win out.
And that's a tough task because some tough games coming up still for Iowa. But they're right in a segue to the Iowa State segment here. Now all of a sudden you're looking at two teams very much in bowl contention. Iowa State beats West Virginia 31-14. It was their first Big 12 win of the year, but very similar defensive domination. It's very similar to the Iowa game. Dominate defensively.
How often have we said that?
Yeah, they're very much mimicking one another this year.
Although Deckers can move and run a little bit.
Well, and it's just the point I've been making the whole time is he's, become quite turnover prone. I've been trying to point out that he's still really young, in terms of reps, and the offensive line and running game have been so bad. He's going to be a nice quarterback, but he's not ready to drop back and throw it 60 times like he's been asked to do. He's not good enough. He doesn't see the field well enough. He doesn't see progressions. He's not there. He's not that type of a quarterback that they've been asking him to do.
Well, and what quarterback can throw it 60 times and not have a couple big mistakes?
Not many. And Iowa State goes out, averages 5 yards per carry, 175 rushing yards in the game. You see Cartevious Norton finally have that game that we all kind of thought was coming. And the offense wasn't great. I mean, they stalled out on a lot of drives early on. But to me, Chris, I started looking at Iowa State's schedule really hard last Thursday night. And I was noticing all these injuries with Oklahoma State. And I knew that they would be favored against Texas Tech. Well, it turns out Oklahoma State's just cratering right now because of these injuries. Iowa State is favored on the road in Stillwater next week, and they will be favored the next week in Texas Tech against Texas Tech. So, what a change a week makes for Iowa State. Where this is, they could very easily go and lose next week, but man, hope is there to get to the postseason potentially.
Mm-hmm. Totally turn this thing around, right? What I loved about this game is while the offense kind of sputtered for 3 quarters, this game could have gone either way. It was 10-7 going to the fourth. For 3 quarters there to start that game, you were a big turnover, a big special teams mistake, a big penalty away from giving this to West Virginia, and it didn't happen. Didn't turn it over. Didn't make a special teams gaffe. Only 2 penalties the entire game. They took a step forward with this victory, and yeah, they should have won. And I had them winning by double digits.
You're like the Iowa State Clone-Stradamus here these days.
Well, ever since I gave up on that 10-win season,
I've been all
young
over
my Iowa State picks.
Young lady runs into me Friday night at a local establishment. She's a big 2 guys named Chris fan.
Who isn't?
And she's diehard Clone. She diehard. And I get this a lot where people say about you and John Miller, and they're like, God, I wanted to hate those guys. I always hated them so much, and now I kind of like them. And they blame me for it. And this gal's philosophy is that you did the 10-2 thing just to do like a little devil's tweak on the Cyclones. That you're still a clone devil, and you did that on purpose just to make Iowa State lose. Just this one gal's opinion.
I've heard that from many Iowa State fans when I made that. Not all, and not a majority, I don't think, but I've heard that from a lot of Iowa State fans. No, I really did. They swept the non-con. They won at Iowa.
The drive at Iowa City was very impressive.
The Big 12 isn't a it's a meat grinder, but the Big 12 isn't a great conference this year. Oklahoma is way down. Texas is getting better, but not the Vince Young Texas. We didn't know what TCU was going to be, but they haven't played them yet. I thought that they did have a really good chance to win 10 games. And when you look at the games they lost, they're all one-score games. They could have gone either way. I'm not saying that I wasn't wrong. I was wrong big time on that 10-win prediction. But I wasn't making it up.
No.
I wasn't saying that.
You were going off of what you had seen.
To be able to, yeah. And at the same time, I get way more hate from the Iowa side than I do the Iowa State side. There's still some Iowa State fans that think I'm just, out to get Iowa State and
This girl was just kidding around, but I thought it was funny.
But they finally didn't make the mistake on special teams, didn't turn the ball over, didn't commit penalties.
And really,
they won in the margins.
They did win in the margins, and their defense was dominant. That game, what was leading to be a frustrating game because it scoreboard-wise was really close for 3 quarters, but it never felt close. Like if you just watched the teams, Iowa State felt 3 scores better than West Virginia for the majority of that football game. I like Tom Manning. I think he was trying to open things up a little bit. I really did.
Hey,
he ran a
this
reverse.
Week, Brian Ferentz, Tom Manning.
But again, like in defense of both of those guys, I was talking to my dad about this. Like when you can't run the ball and your offensive line is subpar, it's what plays can you call, right? And when that line starts for both of these teams to get a little bit of push, man, all of a sudden as a play caller, you have a lot more options. And we saw that with both schools on Saturday. How's that for analysis?
Yeah, it's great. Iowa State had to have it, then they got it. And now here we go. Matt Campbell all season seemed to think they get that one win, and here we go. All we need to do is win that one game. So here we go. I'm gonna make a prediction here on Monday, and I don't want to put too much on him because Breece Hall is maybe one of the best running backs in the history of not only Iowa State but the Big 12. But it took him about 4 or 5 games before he really started to shine for Iowa State. Did the same thing with David Montgomery. Cartevious Norton will have his big breakout game on Saturday at Oklahoma State. Bad rush defense, beat up. Norton finally getting reps and gets into the end zone twice. He's going to go wild in Stillwater. That's my prediction right now. And then you see if you can ride him the rest of the way. Give me a little stat line. Give me a taste of what it might look
150 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Okay. That would be a breakout game.
I think I'll go a little bit, 135 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dumb it down just a little bit. But I think he was a guy, came in the spring last year, Chris, and you start hearing, you can always tell when a guy's going to really make an impact early. Like those guys always stand out. Now, it doesn't mean that they're always going to be a, potential like 3-time all-conference type guy. But when a guy's going to play as a true freshman and make a big impact, they always stand out in my experience. And I started hearing about Norton in spring practice last year about this guy's different. Well, he goes out against SEMO, has a couple of really nice carries early in that football game, and then he gets hurt. Recovers from his ankle, then he pulls a hammy or whatever it was. So he's had 2 injuries this year. His first real time back is against Oklahoma. Well, Oklahoma had a bad rush defense going into that game, but I've watched Iowa State long enough to know that they tend to match up better against the West Virginias, Texas Techs, even Oklahoma States of the world, because while they have good players, it's not like their lines aren't twice the size as Iowa State's, like Oklahoma's or Texas, and you're not going 5-star against 3-star. It's 3-star against 3-star, and let's see if we can out-scheme them, that type of a thing. And Campbell's done very well in those sorts of games. Norton was, I think that he's ready for that breakout. Now, he needs help, right? Like, their offensive line has to keep taking steps forward. There's no doubt about that. But this is a great opportunity. One of your notes in the show was what in the hell happened to Oklahoma State, and they're just depleted with injuries. And so one of two things will happen on Saturday. They're either done, or they're going to like bounce back and have that "we're still here" type of moment, and Iowa State's going to be on the receiving end. But
well, I was really surprised to see that they were getting several points at Kansas, and that kind of opened my eyes. Like, whoa,
well,
what is going on here?
Spencer Sanders hasn't been playing. Their defense is
he going to play this week?
We'll find out. It's possible. I mean, if he plays, that makes it a lot tougher.
I mean, they were talking about him as a potential Heisman candidate earlier this season.
Well, he's been hurt. It's not, but they lost their defensive coordinator to Ohio State, and man, it just shows you what one defensive mind can really do. So give Phil Parker and John Haycock raises. Just keep giving them raises. Just keep giving it to them.
Yeah.
Got to have those guys. But yeah, Iowa State's right in the driver's seat right now. They kind of control their own destiny to get to 6 wins. So I'll take it compared to where things were. Let's give a shout out to our friends from Circa Sports Iowa. In Circa Sports, we're heading to Vegas in December. Going to watch the Cyhawk men's and women's basketball games.
Yeah, it's about a month from today, right?
Yeah, yep, month from today. From the largest sports book in the world. Can't wait for that. Download that Circa Sports Iowa app today. This is actually the time of year when you can take advantage of the books, is non-conference college basketball. The lines,
Ooh,
they have no idea how to set lines with all the transfers and stuff.
I mean, there's 360 teams.
Yeah. This is, if you're a sharp mind, this is the time for you. And I am not.
Yeah, or if you know Drake, if you know Northern Iowa, if you know Iowa State, and the teams there, it's especially women's basketball. You can bet on women's basketball too. I mean, you can make some money. I know some guys that have been able to do that in the non-con, and they swear by that. So check them out.
Yeah. Let's go back to football. We will touch on basketball before we wrap this thing up. Bama loses to LSU.
Man, what a game. What a game that was.
One of the better games we've seen in a long time.
I was watching that in Birmingham with a bunch of Alabama fans.
So I'm sure that went over well.
You know, they weren't as upset as I thought they might be. I mean, they weren't throwing things or anything. I think they were just shocked. They really didn't think that they were going to lose this game.
Doesn't it feel like with Brian Kelly feels different at LSU? I guess like when Orgeron, even Les Miles at the end, it didn't feel like anything they were doing was sustainable because he was so bad on the offensive end. Orgeron never really felt like that was a long-term win, even though they signed him to that stupid contract. Like it always kind of felt like
won a national championship. I mean, that team was incredible a couple years ago with Burrow.
But then they fell off so quickly.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like Brian Kelly's going to create a absolute monster for the next decade there. Then you've got Georgia. Tennessee is blossoming, even though they lost on Saturday.
Ooh, they got slapped.
It feels like the SEC's catching up to Bama. Just a little bit. We don't want to overreact to 2 losses, but it doesn't feel like it's Bama and everybody else anymore.
I feel like there's been other times where we've thought, not from inside the SEC, but from a national perspective, we thought that Nick Saban had been caught. Remember when Urban Meyer was at Ohio State and they win the national championship back in 2014 or so? And we have all these people saying boy, I think Urban Meyer is going to he's going to overtake that claim for the best head coach in the country. Then Meyer kind of went, not by the wayside, but took a step back a little bit. Ohio State hasn't won a title since then. Then it was Dabo. Dabo was the guy. Dabo, in fact, went against Alabama several times. A couple national championships. He's the guy. Nick Saban's still there. Now it's Kirby Smart. But the difference is, as you said, that's in the SEC. Other division, but now it's coming from within the SEC. Kirby Smart and Georgia win it last season. They continue to, they are the best recruiting team in the country over the last 4 years or so. And now this season, they're supposed to take a step back. Bama was, on paper going into this season, it might be easy to forget, they were looked at as the perfect team.
Yeah.
Because you had the Heisman Trophy winner, Bryce Young, on one side, and you had the best player in college football, the likely number 1 overall pick, Will Anderson Jr., on the other side. They had it all. And now we're sitting here first week in November, and they're already out of the playoff hunt. I'm not going to say that the dynasty's over. I'm not going to say that. Many people are. I've heard that a lot this weekend. That this is it. This NIL's changed everything. Kirby Smart's changed everything. Alabama's not the big bad beast anymore. I think Alabama still is pretty damn good, and I'll expect Alabama to be in the college football playoff next season again. But it is a little bit different when you have these major head coaches and teams coming for you in the same conference, like Kirby Smart is doing now.
Do you really think they're out of the playoff?
It would take a lot for Alabama to get back in.
Let's say TCU's 12-1.
Well, here's the problem. If Alabama's going to get in, that means it's got to be 3 teams more than likely from the SEC. Okay? Because Tennessee is going to be ahead of Alabama as long as they win out. They'll be 11-1. Maybe they don't win out. Maybe Tennessee stumbles. Alabama wins out. You still have the Tennessee head-to-head win over Alabama, though. So if you're only going to take one of those 2 teams, and they're both sitting there at 10-2, Tennessee would have the head-to-head win. And Alabama isn't going to be able to get to the conference championship game and have a chance to notch another huge win unless LSU loses twice.
Clemson's out now, right? Like they can't.
You would think. And the way they lost the game.
Yeah, they got it.
That was pathetic. They didn't even put up a fight against Notre Dame. ACC is not horrible, but it's not the SEC or the Big Ten. And this offense is bad. I think the way they lost the game, Chris, as you said, the way they lost the game, I think that's more of an eliminator than just a loss.
I kind of think that Dabo deserves a little more heat, too. Like, what I get it, and when he managed his quarterbacks the way he did against Syracuse and it worked. But then, like, what I hate is after that game, Dabo's like, no, DJ's still our guy. He's still our quarterback. Well, no, he's not, because you just benched him, right? Like, and all week going into this game, DJ's our guy. And I'm not surprised that guy came out like a total head case. The way that he had been jerked around like that. And it worked. Like, again, so Dabo, like, he makes that switch against Syracuse.
Yeah, you can pull the rabbit out of the hat once, but twice is pretty tough.
Yeah. So they're out. I don't know.
TCU's in if they win out, but they're like Clemson. Lose once, and
TCU keeps,
they're done.
They were down in the fourth quarter again to Texas Tech. They're losing in the fourth quarter every week.
I really don't think they're going to be there at the end. Do you?
Well, no, and that's why, like, I'm not going to bury Bama yet, because I've seen this committee do this too many, like, I mean, would they put 3 SEC teams in? I guess it wouldn't shock me if Clemson's out, if TCU would lose. But you still have the 2 Big Ten teams.
Somebody in the Pac-12 is going to finish with 1 loss, most likely. Because I think there's 3 teams right now with 1 overall loss.
This is the problem with this system, because just watching these games, Bama's better than any of those teams.
Yeah.
They'd be a 10-point favorite over any of those teams. So it's like with this 4-team playoff deal and this stupid committee, are we trying to find the best teams, or are we trying to find like a national tournament here, right? Like the whole thing is just screwed up. Because if that's the case and it comes down to that and you want the 4 best teams, Bama's in there over
it's not
UCLA.
The 4 best teams.
Yeah,
I know that they say that sometimes, but it's not. It can't be, because you also have to award teams on merit. Like TCU goes 13-0.
Games have to matter.
I don't think that there's going to be people saying, "Oh, TCU is better than Alabama," but Alabama lost, get some games. TCU will have in this scenario, TCU would have won all those games. So I think it's a little bit of both, but I mean merit has to matter, and it does matter. Moving forward, when we expand things a little bit more, it's going to be merit, your conference champions, and then it's also going to be your best teams where you get more at large bids this season, or moving forward when they put that in whatever season that is, whether it's 2025, 2026, it's coming. And I think that will make things more interesting. You're going to have on-campus games, and you're going to have an Alabama team that can lose a couple games in the regular season and still have a chance to play for a championship. But I think that the Pac-12 is where it's at, right? Like whether it's Oregon or USC, I think one of those teams might win out and get into the playoff.
I think Oregon's one of the more interesting playoff debates that we've seen in quite some time, considering how they just got destroyed by Georgia. And, like, that should mean something, but it was also so far ago with the new coach. Like, you have to kind of give them a little bit of grace. And that, I don't know, it's fast. We'll see how they treat it.
Right now, if it ended right now, it's looking like it's going to be Georgia, Tennessee, even though they lost. If they win out, I think they'll get in. Ohio State and Michigan. Now, right now, those are the 4 teams in the best spot.
And TCU in a close 5th.
So we could see multiple rematches there, Chris. I mean, we could see, which isn't good, I don't think, but what can you do? Might see Georgia, Tennessee again. Might see Ohio State, Michigan 2 more times.
We need to make Ohio State, Michigan a playoff game too. Let them play, and then put them in the playoff together. It'd be incredible.
That's what I'm saying. It might happen.
It'd be amazing.
Now, I think what they would do is they would switch it up. They would have Georgia play Michigan and Ohio State play Tennessee.
I thought Saturday was one of the crazier outcome college football weekends we've seen in a while. Michigan State beating Illinois the way that they did was one of the oddest outcomes I can remember, and not the football thing. Like the fact that Illinois would lose to, like, Michigan State has talent. Like, we never doubted that. Like, it's not that shocking, just on a very pure football standpoint.
They beat Wisconsin.
This is a team that had, like, 4 or 5 guys suspended and damn near arrested. Like, there's a police investigation after what happened. Like, kudos to Mel Tucker on being able to get that locker room together, because that was shocking to me. He
earned some of that $100 million.
Man. And then, no, it didn't end in Ohio State getting pushed at Northwestern.
Yeah.
Is a 38-point, and the wind definitely played a huge factor in a lot of those Midwestern games. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that Maryland, Wisconsin, and then Iowa, Purdue, it played a factor in all those. Not taking credit away from the teams. Iowa was thrown into the wind just fine. So it wasn't like, but like, I think Maryland was out of its game a little bit early on in that one because it couldn't throw it all over the field. Mm-hmm. But Ohio State pushing Northwestern getting pushed by Northwestern in any scenario was shocking to me. It was a 7-point game in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's Iowa's last 2 opponents. We just watched these teams against Iowa. It was a 7-point game in the fourth quarter. Incredible.
Yeah, and the win had a lot to do with it, and it will be interesting to see this week how the playoff committee looks at that. I think that Georgia is definitely going to jump Ohio State in the rankings, as they should. I mean, they handled Tennessee a lot better than Ohio State handled Northwestern. I don't think it's anything to read into.
No, I don't.
Moving forward, I just think it was just you're a 38-point favorite. It's Northwestern. It's a miserable place to play. It's a miserable team to play. And they just didn't show up, and Northwestern did.
It was a brutal day too. I camped at Trice, and it turned into a nice day. But about 9 o'clock, if you walked outside of the camper, it was a 30-mile-per-hour wind, cold rain in your face. It was brutal. And I just started pounding unders on the Circa app. And had a pretty good.
I just started pounding Busch Lights.
John Miller sent me a great text on Friday. It was just pouring down rain and like 30-mile-per-hour wind, and he's driving to the Kansas border to just place under bets. Because he technically lives in Missouri and he can't bet, so he drives to the border, hits the location thing, and then places his bets. It was pretty funny.
Did most of those unders come through?
Yeah, it was a great weekend. Last weekend was probably the worst college football betting weekend of my life. This Saturday was probably the best. So it shows you that I know nothing, and it's basically a freaking coin flip. It all evens out. But I had a great weekend. Yeah, these unders were money.
I hope you didn't take the under in my game.
I did not. Actually, I had UTSA was one of my locks of the week, so that they came through for me.
Barely.
I like to zero in on these like certain teams and follow them, and UTSA and Tulane are the two that I've made a ton of money on the last 2 years. Like they always come through for you. Those two teams, they are covering machines.
There's something to be said too. When you see a spread that's close, like that UTSA UAB game last week was a virtual pick'em, but UAB hasn't been able to win close games, and UTSA wins the close games. So, that's right there. That's if you know that, and it's supposed to be close, you have a pretty good idea who's going to end out on top if it is a close game.
Looking forward to Iowa State being on the road this weekend because I'm gonna go to Fareway on Friday, and I'm gonna get the biggest slab of pork ribs. And a lot of people the barbecue guys will tell you to trim the fat, right? And because you want the meat, not me.
You want that fat?
I like chewing on the fat, baby.
Really?
Yeah, I love the fat.
My grandpa was like that. My grandpa Bob.
I had a grandpa Bob. My grandpa was Bob.
We'd make New York strips, and I'd cut that when I was a kid. I would cut that strip of fat off. That was the first thing I did, and give it to old Grandpa Bob. He'll eat it.
When the fat gets a little bit charred from the grill,
it's a good taste.
It's so good.
It's a good taste.
Love the fat. That's what I'm doing this weekend.
Who do you have this weekend? On some Fareway meat fat? Whoa!
There you go.
Look at that Fareway hat. Yeah, where the hell did you steal my meat box?
No, I didn't get a meat box either.
My dad is really concerned. The first comment I got from this Twitter post on my Fareway hat was, "Where's that meat box?"
See, I got my Fareway hat too.
Nice. Yeah, I saw somebody was wondering in the comments, where can I buy this Fareway gear?
It's nice. I love me a trucker hat too. So
yeah, you look good. You look right at home in that trucker hat.
Who do you have this week before we move to basketball?
Oh yeah. Going to Birmingham, baby.
All right.
I'm serious. I'm going again. This is the sixth UAB game I have. They're hosting North Texas, and North Texas I believe North Texas can clinch a spot in the Conference USA Championship game.
So we're going to get a rematch of North Texas and
we should
UTSA.
Yes. Yep.
Looking forward to that. I love Conference USA. You've got me hooked on it. I legit I'm obsessed with it. It's my favorite conference now. It's a blast.
It's been a lot of fun this season. I got a couple more games, and the other one is FAU Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky is another really fun team to watch. I think their quarterback Austin Reed threw for 400 yards in the first half last week.
Man, the hoop season for the Iowa State women actually starts at 11 o'clock this morning. They have that kids game. Oh, what a one shiny moment. Well done, Maddie Van Winkle. Have you ever called a kids game?
Have I called a kids game?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
So, like the Iowa State women, they always tip off their season.
When their kids are in attendance?
There's like 10,000 kids from schools all around. I have not
called one, but I've covered them. I used to cover, they'd have that for like the Iowa Energy games when I was in Des Moines. And,
it's very distracting.
The sound is, yes. And it's just random all throughout the game.
Yeah, and they don't really pay attention to the game. They don't really know.
You get louder cheers like when nothing is happening because something is going on in the stands.
Like somebody's injured on the ground and these kids are cheering, screaming. So that's the Iowa State women. The Iowa State men play IUPUI.
Ooey pooey.
Ooey pooey. Iowa gets Bethune-Cookman. Northern Iowa tips off tonight. They play Wartburg.
Wartburg?
Yeah.
Jeez.
These non-cons can be you got to be a real sicko to get into these. I do. I love them because I view these hassles like Iowa State every year. Iowa's been a little bit different because you guys haven't had like 7 newcomers every year for the last 10 years like Iowa State does. Mm-hmm. But it's like watching practice. And you're watching them like on a game-to-game, watching the rotation change. You're watching them develop. When you have camaraderie from year to year like Iowa has tended to have, it's less of that. Mm-hmm. But I think it presents you're watching an Iowa State game tonight. It's a brand new team from the one that went to the Sweet 16 a year ago. I mean, a couple of similar faces, but it's totally new.
Have you seen the line?
29.
Yeah, Iowa State minus 29.
Iowa's 26. I think is what I saw. Don't even ask me for gambling advice. I have no idea.
It's this time of year's always been really hard for me because I'm just so in football mode. It's the beginning of the biggest month of the season in football, November, and then these basketball games come shooting in. And especially now with a team like Iowa State that has all these new guys, like I have no idea who these guys are right now.
Yeah,
for Iowa State. And, we fast forward 2 months, it's all we're going to be talking about is these basketball teams. So
I'm a sicko.
I'm glad that you're going to be up on it because
I'll stay
I'm still going to be mostly in football mode until, I start calling college basketball games usually in December, but I usually don't call any in November because I'm still calling football games.
I'm calling the Iowa State Phil Knight Invitational. So that'll be pretty sweet. They get Villanova. It's that tournament out in Oregon.
The men or the women?
I'm calling the men. The women will be out
radio?
there too. Yes. They play Villanova in that one. They could play North Carolina. The field is completely stacked. So I'm looking forward to that.
So I assume that's because the football season's still going. Walters has to call the football games?
Yeah, I'm kind of the B team. I'm the bullpen.
Are you the voice of the Cyclones? Wait, how are you and Bloom going to figure this out? Like the voice of the Cyclones in waiting?
Oh, that's Bloom's. That's
what
I'm
I
not
thought. So why are you calling that game?
Well, because Bloom is the collective guy. He's the guy paying the players. He can't call games. Seriously, he can't have anything to do with it. He's the bag man.
And there goes Smith up for the jam. Hey, Smith with the dunk. And by the way, you can donate to his collective at Venmo account.
For real, though, on that collective thing, that's why I think Bama could be slipping a little bit, too. They're not a bunch of – Bama has a ton of fans, but, they're not exactly rich, from what I understand. Compared to, LSU fans and Auburn fans, Bama – isn't exactly its alumni base isn't exactly rich. So
how does Iowa State alumni base compare to Iowa's? Iowa's is richer, right?
Yeah, way more rich. Yeah, Iowa State's a bunch of guys like me. We got veterinarians and engineers. You have doctors and lawyers.
So how does Bloom get money from these guys.
You're gonna have to talk to him. I'm not gonna speak for Bloom. Okay, I don't. It's not my deal. I know that like that's a thing with the Bama deal that a lot of smart people are saying is that they just even like compared to Nebraska. Nebraska's got more NIL potential because they're nuts. They're nuts and they're loaded.
I hate that it's become this. God.
Oh, I'm telling you, man. The next 6 weeks are going to be it is open field free agency. It's already begun.
Football,
yeah,
right?
It has already begun. These guys are getting offers already. Like it is, they got to get something in place. There just has to be rules. I don't care what it is. There's got to be some rules in place. I pay the guys. I want them to get paid. I've been saying that for 10 years. But it's for guys like us who genuinely just love the sports and the games and stuff, it is going to take away from it to some degree. We'll still watch. But so I always tell people, if you like watching players develop and that's a fun part for you, watch women's basketball. And you've got 2 great teams in the state of Iowa now. We have 2 top 10 teams in our state in women's. That's insane. With our population base, we have 2 players that will be on the Naismith final list, and Caitlin Clark and Ashley Jones.
Why don't you think it will infiltrate the women's basketball game like it has?
Money's not as prevalent.
I get that it's not as prevalent, not nearly as, but there's still money out there. I mean,
still a thing. Like, it's absolutely still a thing, but it's not. You're not going to have people making. I mean, I know I have a pretty good idea what Tyrese Hunter got to go play at Texas, and like that money won't exist in the women's game. The women,
I get that, sure. I still think you're going to have some women's players from the smaller schools going to a place.
Absolutely.
But the good thing that Iowa and Iowa State have is that they have as good a fan support for the women's game as anybody does.
Correct. And I would make the argument, too, that women's basketball is still much more, there's a real student-athlete feel. I mean, I traveled with the Iowa State women for long enough, like when you land in a city and then they have study table for the next 2 hours, right, when you land, right? Like they are...
That's not happening with the men's team when you fly out with them to the old tournament?
I'm sure they're doing that stuff, but it's not nearly like when you are a women's player, you generally are expecting to get a degree and you're not going to play basketball the rest of your life. I don't think I've ever met a D1 men's basketball player that doesn't think he's going to end up in the NBA.
It's so true. And I cover Conference USA week in and week out, guys you've never heard of. They think that they're going to the NBA. All of them do.
Yeah.
Because they all of them have at least somebody in their lives that's telling them that they can get there.
AAU
if they're
is
given
really,
a chance, they'll get there.
AAU is what is, and this isn't new. Like this is 15, 20. I mean, when I started with Scout in 2004, this was a thing. Mm-hmm. But it's just a very, very.
Is that back when you were working with Dace and Narcisse?
Yes. That is. I'll never forget the first team meeting with John Narcisse leading the way. And keep in mind, the only job I had ever had in media leading up to this was the sports club writer for the Iowa State Daily. I was writing about like the boxing club and the unicycle club, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting there with Dace and Narcisse 2 weeks later.
Jeez, what was it like? How did he lead the meeting?
Narcisse is very, God rest his soul. He's a very intimidating fellow. Kind of
is he really?
Yeah. We'll get into it some other time.
I didn't know he was intimidating. You remember that hot air balloon accident he got into?
John Narcisse one. This is when I decided I needed to quit because it was honestly like kind of like bullying. He worked like really weird hours and stuff, and if he would need something from me, he was putting together like one of our last magazines that I ever contributed to, and he called me at like 4:00 in the morning and was like yelling at me because he needed some like photo, and like he was like verbally like coming at me at like 3-4 in the morning I'm a college student, and I was just like, I can't handle this. He played just mental
Well, that's like when Brock fills in for Van Wink on the show, and you call him up in the morning and berate him for
listen, you asshole.
But do you remember the hot air balloon accident Narcissus got into?
Yeah, it was on he was getting married.
Was it that
he was getting married in that hot air balloon and it crashed?
Everybody was okay in the crash.
It was on the Today Show or something.
Yeah. Was that the thing that they would do on KXNO where Travis Justice would go out into the iCubs parking lot and he would marry you in a hot air balloon basket in the parking lot?
Yeah, Winkle has the video. There's John in the back. Yeah, and it's going down.
Oh my God. Jesus. Everybody's okay.
Yeah, they all are fine.
From the hot air balloon, right? The accident. We're not making fun of injured people.
No, they're fine. Real quick, make fun of me real quick, because I see Matt has the video up. As we go out for, I went one-on-one with Oshuni on Saturday.
Yeah, I covered his St. Bonaventure.
Yeah, I went one-on-one with him. He's one of the all-time leaders in shot blocks.
Oh, get it out.
I thought, my mindset there, Chris, is that I could, he's a skinny guy.
Was there a hoop there?
Yeah.
Where was the hoop?
This was at a tailgate at Iowa State on Saturday.
It looks like you're just shooting into a cornfield.
Well, that's Coldwater Golf Links in the background. That's at the RV lot.
Well,
but I really did think a guy brought it. Steve
brought a basketball hoop?
Yeah, for the tailgate. We do it right in Ames, man. We don't mess around. So I thought that I could back Oshun in because I'm a girthy man, and I thought that I could out-muscle him a little bit, and it didn't work out to my advantage. Oshun told us that when he stands and puts his arms in the air, flat-footed, he's at 9'2". The hoop is at 10 feet. How crazy is that?
Jeez. He's halfway up the net without moving, without jumping.
Yeah. So anyways. Yeah, he's
on
Iowa
State.
State.
They got a Shuni.
Oh, and then this is Emily Ryan. I went one-on-one with her. This is top 5 point guard in women's college basketball. And I wanted to see if I had the handles to drive past her, and unfortunately, she was just toying with me. Look at this.
What are you doing? Oh my God. You poor bastard. You really didn't have much room to work with, though, with that that bench right behind you. You were kind of boxed
Look at her. She's nonchalant. She's not even in position. She's just toying with me.
But Chris, this is like the no-no that against the press that they tell you to. You dribbled right into the corner. You were totally boxed in. She was guarding you, and you had the grass on one side and a bench on the other. You had no chance.
It's not my fault. I agree.
You were at a strategic disadvantage from the get-go. I'm sorry. I want a redo for you.
Thank you. It's the nicest thing you've ever said for me.
Now, I think it'll go the same way.
But I have, my anxiety is, peaking now because I saw that picture of Narciss, and you just talked me off the ledge, so thank you. That's good. All right, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We appreciate the hell out of you guys. This is fun. Matt Van Winkle, great job, buddy. Always good to have you back. And we'll be back on Thursday. 2 guys named Chris. Later.